Alright, so my name's Hannah, and I'm going to be talking about a prolapsed uterus, particularly in sheep. So this is something that I've actually encountered myself. So it was our second year raising sheep, but it was also our first year having our own lambs. And we asked other breeders like what potential problems we could face in our first year of lambing, and they listed a prolapsed uterus as one of the main things, but they told us not to worry about it because oh, you guys won't have any problems with that. Anything that could possibly go wrong usually happens to us. So we have the prolapsed uterus, which is a condition where the uterus is moved from its original location in the body and it's coming out through the vulvar lips. So one of the main things with a prolapsed uterus is how to identify it is the meatball structures on it. So we had our first ewe lambing, and she did have twins, and we were told to, after the twins were born, just to make sure that she expelled the placenta. So me and my sister went out to the barn, we were waiting, and then this structure started to come out through the vulvar lips, and we thought it was the placenta because it was our first time lambing. We had no idea. And then we started to see the meatball-like structures on it, and then we called around to some other sheep producers in the area, and they told us that it was in fact the uterus coming out. Some of the causes that lead to a prolapsed uterus: multiple lambs in utero, feeding high fiber diets while the ewe is pregnant, limited exercise, if the ewe lays down for long periods of time, and then it usually happens more so in short docked tails, but it's not strictly to those kinds of sheep. So signs to watch out for: a prolapsed uterus usually occurs after pregnancy, but it's not strictly to that. So a prolapsed uterus could happen before pregnancy. These are just a picture to show. Here's the vulva right here, and then you have the unborn baby right here, and then the uterus going all the way around it. So once the baby's born, this sac-like structure is what comes out through the closed cervix and out through the vulva. Some signs to watch out for: these are also signs of when the ewe is about to have the babies. Also, isolation from the flock, sitting for long periods on their back quarters, loss of appetite, and then the uterus presenting itself. So with our case was pretty severe because we didn't know what we were exactly looking at. So the uterus did come pretty far out, and it did take our vet close to an hour to get it back in. And that was going slow to make sure that the vet didn't rupture the uterus, and that making sure that it was all right to put back in. So we did contact our vet. You need to make sure that there's no dirt or debris on the uterus itself. So what our vet did was he brought a bucket full of water, and I don't know if it was saline or cleaning solution that was okay to put on the uterus, but he doused the whole uterus in that solution. And then he examined the whole uterus, making sure there was no punctures, no extra bleeding, making sure that it was safe. And then he did administer penicillin to help with any infection that she would encounter after the uterus was put back into place. And then he also administered oxytocin to help with some of that swelling. And then when putting the uterus back in, we did try to elevate her back end as best we could, but at this point, she was going into some distress. She was uncomfortable. She just had twins, and now she had her uterus hanging out of the back. So we tried having her stand up, and then two of us tried holding up the back end for back by her legs, under her stomach, to help the vet out. And then as the vet was doing it, he did make sure to teach us as he went, which was pretty cool. But he did say that he was using gentle but steady pressure, and he wasn't just taking his hands and shoving hard and in weird places, making sure not to rupture the uterus. He was doing a nice gentle steady pressure on it. And then He did have to suture RU back in the vulva, so he took the needle and went up around it like this, up through the top, and then he came back down, and then he kind of pulled it all down together at the bottom so the uterus couldn't come back out. There was, usually in this case you do get a lot of swelling in that case, but he did leave enough room for her to like be able to urinate comfortably and things like that. But with our case, since it was severe, usually when you have a prolapsed uterus, you do call that you and get rid of her just so you don't have to deal with that problem for the following year. In our case, it was her first time lambing. She gave birth to twins and she prolapsed. We did keep her for another lambing season, mainly because it was my sister's very first sheep and we gave her the benefit of the doubt. She did have twins the following year. They were born safe and healthy, but she did have more trouble. Her belly kind of like dropped. The vet didn't really know what to call it, but like underneath her stomach kind of like dropped and distended.
Her ligaments gave out.
Yeah, it gave out. So we just kind of like kept her after that as like more of a pasture ornament because like my sister refused to like let her go. But her babies were healthy. They grew just fine. But yeah, and then we did encounter more prolapsed uteruses after that. And then we only kept them for that 1 year, and then we did get rid of them just so we didn't have to go through that trouble. We had no idea if they would do fine the next year or if they would be in more distress and then die in birth. And then we wouldn't have healthy babies, so we did end up calling them after that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have your references.
That's your references. Let's give her a round of applause. Now, were those pictures your sheep or were they just pictures?
They were just pictures we
Yeah.
found because at the time I wasn't really thinking
I know.
of
I was thinking of taking pictures.
Yeah,
of your
things
own
happen
sheep.
really fast.
Yeah.
And
How many sheep did you lamb out that year?
that year, it was our first year, so we only had like 3,
Okay.
but she was our one
Yeah,
trouble.
yeah. Okay, questions, comments? I got a few more, but I'll let them.
I have a comment. So when I worked at a vet clinic in my hometown, they started to have a sheep that was prolapsing, even though they hadn't like given birth yet.
Mhm.
So they had to go in and like do a C-section along with like sewing up her vulva so it couldn't prolapse.
Mhm.
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, like she said, Hannah said, it usually happens after they give birth, but it can happen anytime. That's rare, relatively rare,
Mhm.
to do it right before birth. Yeah, this thing about prolapse, and she talked about these meatball-like structures on the uterus. And so we can't leave the room without knowing what they're called. Because sheep and goats and cattle all have the same type of placenta and placental attachments. And we should know that, you know, when a ewe is born, you can count those connections on the uterus and tell how many they have even when they're 2 days old. They never change in number, but they change in size, because when they're not pregnant, they're very small. And then when they're near term, that's when they're the biggest and kind of like a meatball size. And they never leave the uterus. I mean, the placenta's already gone. And there's a similar structure on the placenta, but that's gone. What are the meatball structures on the uterus? Caruncles. And you spell it just like you think. It's the weirdest word, caruncle, all one word, but the caruncles are indicating that it for sure was a uterus because the placenta was already gone, but it's very interesting. This summer, I was up visiting my cousin in North Dakota. He had a cow that was having a prolapse, but it was really amazing, and I should have taken pictures, but you know, when you have cattle, they're like out in the pastures, and you're lucky to get close to them at all. But this cow had I guess I'd say vaginal prolapse, but it was going to work into a uterine prolapse, but it was like maybe this far out. This was after calving, and very swollen. And my cousin, who's just basically getting into cattle, he goes, well, will that go back and will everything be okay? And I said, well, if she does it this year, and it was something he just bought, so we didn't have a history, like, you know. Anyway, I go, the likelihood of another prolapse next spring is very good. So, you know, the word cull is often used, although you kept a sheep because it was a pet more, you know, the first time she, I can use that. But most people cull those because nothing ever gets better. The next year is likely to go even further. But what was really interesting is when I saw it, you know, it was very noticeable. And then I had to visit him again, you know, like a month and a half, and you couldn't ever tell she had them. It had regressed. Because when they first give birth, that's when the uterus is the biggest. And it was amazing how it shrank, but then, remember, next year it might be bad again. But here's another reason why you want to call that animal, and this is very good. When the next year at the mating, the bull's mating this cow, in my case, he might damage his penis because of a malformation of the vagina due to that prolapse. So there's two reasons to do it. Get rid of her because she's likely to do it again, but then another one, and maybe even more important, the bull, he has to make 25 plus or minus cows this, you know, after they give birth in the summer, and if you damage his penis, that bull's worth $5,000, $6,000, you know what I mean? You just damaged him because of that one cow. So there's like two reasons to get rid of him, the prolapse. It's very interesting, and yeah, you have to put it all back, you've got to wash it off, and the suture, that's the other thing. So the suture was there, and usually it looked like an umbilical tape to me. Did you remove the suture before she had the next lambs, the next spring, or whenever she fall, I should say?
Yeah, so the vet told us to wait like
Yeah.
10 to 14 days.
Before,
Yeah,
yeah.
and then watch like the swelling and everything,
Right.
and like we just took it out ourselves.
Yeah.
And then after that, we kept a close eye on her still, and then she didn't ever prolapse it again, she just had that one
Right.
problem with her stomach.
Because it looked like umbilical tape to me. Do you guys know what umbilical tape looks like? It's very, it doesn't reabsorb at all, and it just stays there. But I was just curious, it's there, you wouldn't have an easy lambing if it was still there, so yeah, you took it out.
Yeah, we did.
Very interesting little tidbits. Any other comments? So you always want twins or more for sheep, you know, if you're not familiar with that. Like cattle, you'd rather have just one usually, two is okay, but not very often, but sheep, you need two, an average of two. So. Caruncles, that's our new take-home word. Holly is on to the pizzle now. She is, she's doing a great job. Okay, see you guys later. I'll send you a little email when I put something out on Friday or Saturday. It won't be due until the week after next. Thank you so much. Good job, Phil.